All right, today we're going to uncover the story of a lost superpower. We're talking about a civilization that mastered iron, went toe-to-toe with Egypt, and then just vanished. Let's dive into the incredible world of the Hittites. I mean, seriously, think about that. It sounds like something out of a fantasy novel, but it actually happened. For thousands of years, one of the ancient world's most powerful empires was little more than a whisper, a mysterious name in a handful of old texts. They were the Hittites, a kingdom that once stood as an equal to the giants of the Bronze Age. So, our story kicks off more than 3,500 years ago, right in the heart of modern-day Turkey. From their capital city, the mighty fortress of Hattusa, the Hittites built an empire that would come to dominate the Near East for centuries, stretching all the way from the Aegean coast deep into Syria. So how did they do it? What was their secret? Well, our very first clue lies in their military. And, the Hittites didn't just build an empire, they forged it. And I mean that quite literally. Their technological and tactical genius left most of their rivals completely in the dust. The absolute foundation of Hittite power was their army. It was this incredible machine of efficiency and innovation, and it's what allowed them to take on much larger, much wealthier opponents and still come out on top. They weren't just warriors, they were, in a way, military engineers. So let's break down what made them so tough. First, there was the tech. They were some of the first to figure out how to work with iron, creating weapons that were way stronger than the typical bronze stuff everyone else was using. Second, their chariots were a total game changer. Other armies used them like mobile archery platforms, but the Hittites built them lighter and faster, and used them like tanks to smash right into enemy lines. And finally, their tactics. They were masters of the surprise attack, using speed and sheer terror to break an enemy's will before the real fight even began. And get this, by 1400 BCE, that's ages before the official Iron Age, iron weapons were already pretty common among their top soldiers. This gave them a huge technological advantage that really shaped the balance of power in the region for a long, long time. But being a military powerhouse wasn't their only trick. Our second clue to their success is found in their really sophisticated system of law and diplomacy, which we only know about thanks to thousands of clay tablets dug up from their ruined cities. Check out this quote from King Murshili II. He's writing this during a devastating plague, and he's basically begging the gods to make it stop, saying he knows it might be a punishment for something his own father did. This one line gives us this incredible window into how they thought, this deep, powerful belief that crime, divine anger, and consequences could echo across generations. And that belief was actually written into their laws. It's this idea of collective punishment. If a high-ranking official committed treason, or even if a servant was just negligent, their whole family could pay the price. Now, to us, that sounds unbelievably harsh, but for the Hittites, it was a powerful tool to ensure loyalty and keep the empire stable from within. But here's the really wild part. For all its harshness, their legal system had this surprisingly modern twist. Pretty much no one was above the law. We have records of a queen being put on trial and exiled by her own stepson, who was the king. A prince even wrote about being sued by a rival and having to show up in court. This idea of accountability, that even the most powerful people had to answer for their actions, was super unusual for the Bronze Age. And this legal, rule-based way of thinking, it didn't just stop at their borders. The Hittites applied that same structured approach to how they dealt with other kingdoms, which made them some of the most skilled diplomats of their time. For about 200 years, the Hittites and the Egyptians were locked in this epic superpower rivalry, kind of like a Bronze Age Cold War. It all came to a head at the legendary Battle of Kadesh. It was a massive, bloody clash of chariots, and in the end, nobody really won. It was a total stalemate. So 16 years later, they decided to do something completely revolutionary. They created the Treaty of Kadesh. And this is a huge deal. It's the earliest major international peace treaty that we have the actual text for. And it was so much more than just a ceasefire. It was a full-on mutual defense pact saying, I've got your back if someone attacks you. It had an extradition agreement for returning refugees, and to seal the deal, they called on 1,000 of their respective gods to witness it and curse anyone who broke the terms. This treaty literally brought stability to the entire region for decades. So you've got this empire that's mastered war, diplomacy, law, and technology. They're at the absolute top of their game. And then, poof, they disappear. And this brings us to the final, and honestly the most baffling part of our investigation. The collapse wasn't a slow fizzle. It was sudden and it was catastrophic. Right around 1200 BCE, the entire imperial system just imploded. Their massive capital city, Hattusa, was burned to the ground and abandoned. Their writing system just vanished. For hundreds of years, a dark age fell over the whole region. So what in the world could bring down such a powerful empire? Well, there's no single simple answer. The Hittite collapse was part of a much bigger crisis that hit the whole region, something we now call the Bronze Age collapse. Most historians think it was a perfect storm, a combination of several disasters hitting all at once. The leading theory points a finger at mysterious invaders called the Sea Peoples, but their attacks were probably only successful because the empire was already on its knees from massive famines caused by climate change and was being torn apart by rebellions from within. These Sea Peoples are definitely the most famous culprits. We mostly know about them from Egyptian records, which paint this picture of a confederation of warriors who swept in from the sea and just laid waste to kingdom after kingdom. But who were they really? Were they just pirates taking advantage of the chaos? Or were they desperate refugees, fleeing the same climate disasters that were crushing the great empires? We still don't know for sure. So the Hittite Empire fell, and as it crumbled, its memory just faded away. For 3,000 years, they were basically lost to history, until this forgotten world was finally brought back into the lights. I mean, just try to wrap your head around that. An entire superpower just forgotten. It wasn't until the early 1900s, when archaeologists started digging at a site in Turkey, that they realized they'd found the lost capital, Hattusa, and with it, its royal archives filled with thousands upon thousands of clay tablets. And this discovery changed everything. Before this, historians saw the ancient Near East as a two-player game. You had Egypt over here and Mesopotamia over there. The rediscovery of the Hittites revealed a third massive player on the board, and it forced us to completely rewrite the history of the entire Bronze Age. It was a much more complex, interconnected world than anyone had ever imagined. So why should we care about the Hittites today? Because their legacy is still with us. Their pioneering work with iron helped set the stage for the Iron Age. Their ideas about international treaties and diplomacy laid some of the earliest foundations for how nations interact even now. And their story is this powerful, sobering reminder that even the mightiest empires can fall. Which leaves us with one last really fascinating question. The Hittites were a lost superpower hiding in plain sight for 3 millennia. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other stories, what other entire civilizations are still buried out there beneath the dust, just waiting for us to find them?